So by now, I hope you guys have gotten some good information about the presentations, got your answers or questions answered by some of the presenters that we've had today. So we've been really lucky to have additional speakers come join the panel, and I'd like to introduce them. So there's Curtis Yanko. He's from Sonatype, one of our sponsors. Alberto Silveira. He's from Schoology. He's one of our past clients, and love to have him on the panel. Of course, you guys know Steve and Anthony from RCA, our Real Capital Analytics, coming in. Anthony. You know Sukhbir, he's our president. Go ahead and have a seat, guys. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, Steve Cross. From Atlassian. All right, so I'll let them take it from here.
I'll apologize in advance. And it looks like I'm looking at my phone, but I'm really not using Facebook. I tossed the questions into Evernote, so they primed me with questions for the panel, which is fun. Okay. And I think my microphone just came on.
My theory is Steve is texting his girlfriend while he is asking his questions.
Not a good idea, because half the people in this room know my wife. So, there's a way of living to my age and keep things straight. Let's see. So, gents, let's ask you. This whole thing has been about DevOps. What's your definition of DevOps?
Well, actually, I'm supposed to. DevOps, isn't that a guy?
It's a band.
Right, it's one of those bands that people confuse with, they think it's the guy, right?
That's exactly what it is.
Didn't come off the way we rehearsed it. No, when we got this question, it was interesting to me. I have to admit I snickered a little bit, and this is one of these questions that's probably gotten a little bit old. But when I thought about my answer, it was more or less that I don't try to define it, right? So I think defining it starts to limit it. Because DevOps, at the end of the day, is a really holistic thing within your company. So, any effort to define it is going to sort of start to diminish it. So for me, when I think about it, I could describe it a little bit. And it would be about getting everybody aligned on delivering customer value, right? So it just starts with that. And making sure everyone understands how they contribute or inhibit that. And then how can we do that faster? And you think about Gene Kim's first way. And so the term itself just recognizes work starts with developers, and until it gets to operations, it's not really any value, right? So it just represents the alpha and the omega. But so for me, the definition is around just getting everyone aligned to that, and starting to drive from there, and starting to understand how can we go faster, and not by cutting corners, right? We could go really fast, but it wouldn't be to anybody's benefit. So you have to take some steps.
So who has something to add to that? Who would like to leverage from that or step off from that?
I like to go a little bit back on the definition, and maybe the word culture is a little bit overloaded many times, but I think the challenge for DevOps, it's more than tools, it's more than just procedures and things written somewhere, but it's about having people having the same understanding, the same excuse me, terminologies, and sharing that collective goal and how to get there. And yes, automation that's a huge part of it. But it's about people trying to add the business value, and how can we get there, and trying to understand. If you're running Scrum, if you're running Kanban, it's about empowering those teams, and that actually what brings the DevOps, and all together blend it up, and it's gonna come up with something good, and which is the business value. So,
Stephen, would you like to add to that?
I think we've had the luxury of, we're a small shop, so the wall between the developers and the operations folk was never particularly high for us because everybody knows each other. But it's definitely true, it's a culture more than a process. It's a way of thinking. And we want to get better at it. We want to get to the point where the developers really own the process from soup to nuts. And Anthony here has been in the position where he was operations for this firm. So I know he has a vested interest in seeing that happen, to where not everything on the operational side is on one person's desk, that it can be a shared thing so that everybody's really moving in the same direction.
Anthony?
So I think you guys get the pattern here. You ask 35 people what's DevOps, you're going to get 35 answers. For me, it's infrastructure as code. When you see your stacks and your networks and your everything else as some artifact in your deployable product, that's when you're doing DevOps. When it doesn't really matter who's doing it, all you're doing is pressing the button, you know? For us, we don't have a DevOps squad. We have 1, 2 people doing it. And what's going to get us there is basically the Addteq team.
This would be a good transition. This would be a good transition
I
to
would do when
Sukhbir.
I'm wired up.
So,
The way I look at DevOps, and before I give that answer, I try to break down things into very simpler terms. And in those simpler terms, DevOps it's just like life. It's a journey. It's not a destination. Every day you learn new things. You improve upon that. You implement that. You learn more things. So 30 years ago, when Apple introduced Mac, and Steve Jobs introduced that on the stage, and it says, "Hello, I am Mac," people clap for it. Now, things like that happens every day, everywhere. And we're like, yeah, it's okay, no big deal.
nobody notices, that's right.
Yes, and that's DevOps. You improve upon whatever things you can improve on, and then you take it to the next level.
That's good. So, yeah, Anthony, you're right. Ask 35 people. So let me come back to Anthony for this. Why does your organization strive towards DevOps?
That's a great question.
I didn't write it, I'm just delivering it.
I would say my best version of the short answer would be it's to keep up with the pace of developer velocity. You know, if your systems can't keep up with what your developers can put out, then you're probably going to be losing money. You know, so it's how do we keep the systems as agile as the development? You know, and I think DevOps is probably the only answer to that question. You know?
So this isn't a printed question, but I'd really like to know what you think of that as, is DevOps the next evolution from agility, from agile?
I think it definitely is. But, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, the why DevOps is because survival isn't mandatory, right? So you do DevOps so you can survive. You do it because you want to compete and win, and you want to be in a position to be nimble enough to react when disruption comes along. And that, you know, it could be just changing market conditions. It could be changing customer need. But if you're not in a position to quickly react when there's one of those inflection points that happens every month now,
Yep. Like you said.
then you're not going to survive. And, you know, so the amount of time companies spend on the top 500 list is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And you don't want to be that company, right? So that, to me, the why, I think we can all agree on.
I don't know, let's ask. Do you agree with the why?
Let me think. I think I do. Maybe. It's about why DevOps, and one of the biggest challenges is like to have the decision makers, the up management, the investors, like the stakeholders, to actually agree that that's important, because the first thing that comes is that we need to deliver that new feature for that customer, and then we need to deliver that feature, and then that's what comes, and then where the infrastructure as a code comes, and where the time to actually to invest that comes. And then if you step back and you understand and you have that mindset, eventually that's going to pay off. And so why Schoology, and we want to do and we want to incorporate more and more and continuously improve. It's because we know that every day it's going to pay off, and as we are not here to win a game, but there's like several championships, and that's the key, I guess. That's why we refer DevOps.
So
I agree with you.
Let me get back to Stephen. So what's your organization's maturity level in DevOps?
So I actually Googled it to see where we are. I looked at one of those images, and I was actually pretty impressed with where we are, because I would have thought would still be, whatever the timeline is, left to right. I would have thought we were more on the left. I found one. It was in DevOps. It was continuous deployment. Where are we in that maturity? And we were kind of right dab in the middle. Again, that impressed the hell out of me. Like I would have thought, since I still feel like we're new to this, that we would have been more on the left. Still plenty of room to grow, plenty of places we can get to, but we were checking a lot of the boxes right smack in the middle of that timeline, and I think that's great. In terms of our motivation, it means we're kind of delivering a bit on the agile promise of getting business value out where it can be touched, out where it can be experienced. Like, we're delivering on that business value. We also have the motivation of, we want great people to come work for us, and having those systems and that infrastructure where your ideas, where you can innovate and actually see that get through the pipeline and see your concepts realized in a sort of frictionless way, we're getting really close to being able to achieve that.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Really impressive. How's the rest of the panel feel about that? Where's your DevOps maturity level?
So for us at Sonatype, it's interesting because I worked in Fortune 100 insurance companies for a long time, and now I'm at a small startup, and so it's given me some extra perspective. But I'll say this: we sort of benefit from, we're still small. We're still small enough that we can be pretty transparent to everyone, and we're just starting to get into the sides where that transparency starts to become a challenge. But was an eye-opener for me as I'm watching like my marketing department, who I think does DevOps way better than my engineering department. Because we actually are able to, sort of key to it is, if you can experiment and actually try things and use that data to help you make your decisions. And we do a great job of that in our marketing. So it's interesting that DevOps even applies. And that's why I said, it's very holistic, right? It's not just about writing code and banging out things. It's really, how does your whole company work together to meet market needs, to meet customer demands, right? And so yeah, I think it's interesting because I see this, like, from an engineering standpoint, we struggle a little bit from a highly decentralized team and some of the challenges there. But I feel like our marketing department does a great job with like A/B testing and a lot of experimentation, and then making decisions based on facts, which is sort of key to all of this, I think.
Based on facts, not assumptions.
Right.
I don't want to be talking too much, but where we are in terms of DevOps, I think the first question that we always ask, all right, we got interested into that topic, and what is that? And we accept the fact that we're not great. We do daily deployments, which is great, but we still have, from the technical point of view, we still rely on manual QA? And how do you do like a daily deployment rely on like an human to validating that? And that actually comes like with, I think most of organizations have the challenge with like, we do have like legacy, we do have like monolithic applications. And so we start to actually break that down, slice that elephant in small pieces. And going forward, we start to microservices, using Lambdas and AWS and all those kind of stuff. But for the monolith, we had to treat like teams slightly different. We had to actually adapt and like how each one of those situations would deliver, each one of those teams would deliver. And that actually goes back to one of the principles of Agile, which is empowering the team, trusting the team that you have, and let them to figure out like what's the best way to deliver. So going back to the original question is where we are, I guess we are continuously improving what we have. That never ends. And we have to accept what is not working well and try to make things better. And then, I guess that's where we are. That never ends.
No, that's good. That's a good answer. So what are I'm not asking you, you're supposed to be mature. So what are some of the challenges for DevOps adoption that you've experienced? For you guys in a smaller organization, it's probably different than for these guys.
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot to learn. All that automation doesn't come for free. It's a lot of working muscles. So there was a lot of drilling. You know, even just getting used to Git, merges, handling your branches correctly, handling your Git flow. That's all. It's not something you just read a book on and it happens. You have to drill it. You have to practice. You have to practice in a sandbox. You know, you can't be practicing in prod. So there's a lot of ramp up to just getting the basics and the fundamentals down. But we were lucky enough to have the business behind us, you know, who had the patience to let us pursue it this way, and really develop those muscles. So that now, I'm not sure that it's seamless, but it's definitely not effortless, but it's becoming more second nature in memory muscle.
Now, you're in a much larger organization. What were the challenges you guys faced in adoption?
We are large in number of users. Our development team is not that large. We are like about 40 to 50 people. But that's actually something interesting that shows that we have to be effective in everything that we do. And DevOps is also about being effective, right? It's eliminating what is not necessary. It's trying to actually to have like your processes, less is more, that kind of thing. So challenges is, I think, compare even with my previous experience in finance and like now it's like we have like the number one is that the organization wants to invest in that. So it comes from like the CEO, CTO, like the investors want and see the value in that. So once you have that, things start to become way easier. Because when that doesn't happen, maybe it's time to move on. But or just hire Addteq or something like that, and then we can get that done. But but it's I think the challenges is it's about everything in life. Is trying to find the perfect balance. It's how can you keep adding the value, but still improving the infrastructure. Not only think on right now. You have to kind of to have that in place, I guess. It's about the balance.
So let me ask you a different question, though.
Well, give me a minute on this one.
All right,
because
all right.
It's so, and I want to answer from a standpoint of it's not so much from Sonatype, but I started a DevOps Center of Enablement, again, at a giant healthcare company. So it was, and I did this before the first ever State of the DevOps report came out. And it was a brand new thing, and nobody could answer even the first question then. So I'll tell you some of the challenges, so I think that's more germane to this audience because that's sort of, we were new and it was emerging. And I'll say a couple things up front. Himanshu showed a giant graph of tons of tools.
Yeah.
So I will say one of the challenges is not trying to pick all your tools up front, right? Don't think you have to decide, okay, what are all the things we need before we can even get started? That's a big mistake. You can spend 2+ years just doing that, and by the time you're done, you're gonna have to do it again. All right, and then the next thing is, and I like what you said, you talked about the muscle memory. And to me, that's true because I watched this with Agile. For anyone, if you've been around long, when Agile first came in, the problem with Agile was the rest of the company didn't have the competency to support you. And it's the muscle memory. It's like, and I put it simply, I put it to your point, if you can't self-service an environment, you're not ready to do this. If you don't have that basic capability, you need to have that conversation before you have the DevOps conversation, right? And why is that? So why is that key? Because now you can get to where I'm talking about. Now you can get to, it's a place where we can do experimentation. If I can quickly get an environment and I can try some stuff out and I can do some A/B testing with a couple of different choices and I can get some data to take back to the team and say, this is why I think we want to go with this database over that database. Now we're cooking with gas. Now we've got people who can get their ideas out there, who can get the facts, who can bring it back to the team and start to drive that team forward. And so to me, the challenges for a lot of folks are just being in a position to start and not, and sadly, DevOps is very much culture. But if you don't get that tooling in place that provides that basic foundation on which you can start to do the cultural things like have a generative culture, safe to fail culture, these kinds of things, it's just going to all get jumbled up. You're just going to get really, really frustrated. So that's what I wanted to bring to it. And that's what I saw, because we were so far ahead of the curve. Not so far, I don't want to but we were right at the beginning of the curve. And so I saw a lot of these things, because we thought, oh, wow, we're going to do this. We're just going to dive in. And then you realize, we're not ready to crawl, let alone walk.
That's a terrific answer. And then a high-value answer for the audience.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Now I want to switch. I actually want to ask Sukhbir this. What advice, the question is, what advice would you give to organizations that are looking to kickstart their DevOps initiatives? I'm going to change that. What advice do you give to organizations that are looking to kickstart their DevOps initiatives?
So one of the first advice we always give them is, you cannot change the whole organization in one shot. You need to take baby steps. And we follow the 6 degree of separation rule. That so if your organization have hundreds of people and you have hundreds of teams, there are at least 6 teams who are interconnected with each other. So pick that 6 teams, try to convert them, and then take one of the team which got the most success out of those 6. And then use the 6 degree of separation logic from them, and then you go forward. Within a year or so, if your organization is as big as, let's say, 10,000 or 20,000 people, you'll be able to bring everybody together because people will teach other people and then they bring them on board.
This is really interesting because you're presenting it like engineering, but it's actually people. You said the same thing. Everybody said the same thing. This is a people thing and a culture thing. This is I think fascinating. Okay, so you guys that have implemented it, right? What advice would you give to companies that are just starting to kickstart their DevOps initiatives? Where are the landmines?
This is going to be a one-liner. So I'll pass off to Steve in a moment after this line. Convince upper management that DevOps actually exists. Once you do that, the hard part is over.
Yeah, I can't top that.
I agree with both. I guess it's the upper management 200%, and what else? It's about getting like the organization across departments to see the value on that. It's because maybe DevOps becomes like a little bit more technical term, and many people don't even understand what's the meaning and what does that mean. So I think it's like if I'm talking with like a customer success team or like implementation teams or support teams and like whatever team we have, like sales, marketing, we all benefit of that, and of course we all do this with like a collective goal of like impacting our users, our customers. So I guess it's as you said, like baby steps. Like it's trying to start small, but effective, and start to actually get like early and quicker feedback to start to if it's not working, fine, try something else, but try something different. So I guess it's like fail early, but and that gives time to actually react to that. So it's okay if it's not work. As long as you know how to monitor and how to react fast. So many times people don't change, teams don't change, organizations don't change just because they are afraid of change. So I guess like if I had like one advice to give you and that you could take, like if you're not doing DevOps or if you're like in the early phase or if you have to talk with anyone, it's just like it's okay. Whenever things don't go well, to actually try to go well, and it's to accept change. Because DevOps is about continuous improvement. It changes all the time. By the way, everything that we said here is outdated. We have to learn tomorrow again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, mine's pretty short, but it goes back to what I said before. First off, my first advice is don't get ahead of yourself. Make sure you have. Like I said, it's just if you. My basic question is if people cannot just easily self-service getting an environment, you're not ready. All right, so now maybe you're there. Then it's really again back to what I said at the beginning, which is make sure everyone understands why. We're aligned at delivering value as fast as possible, right? It's a simple business case that everyone in the company can understand, and then from there, now it's just around reducing those times and driving it forward. But you have to create the environment where learning can happen, where people can do those experiments and drive it forward. And once you have that, get them aligned around making it go faster. And then the last bit I would say is, forget everything you know about the current process, right? The next biggest challenge you're going to run into is, but we've always done it that way, and you start to automate the way you do things today, and you really need to peel all that back. You really need to rethink. So it was alluded to in one of the talks. You get to the point where you start re-questioning your architectures. You start re-questioning lots of things. You have to forget everything you think you know about how you deliver value and be open to the idea that we can do it differently and it'll be better for everyone, right? And so I think that's my three things, right?
This is such calm, reasoned advice. This is really just super, I think. Now, obviously you have to prove this to management, right? First of all, you have to sell it to management. And then downstream, you have to prove it to management. Have you been able to demonstrate ROI?
I have. I was reading an article earlier. When you start with metrics, one of the most important things to understand is sort of your baseline. Where are we today? And we have a pretty good thing here. It's lead time, right? So we're talking, in DevOps, we're talking how long does it take us to get value out? And then you start looking at anything time related. Time is money, right? So if you want to make an ROI justification in a company, you start talking about time, because time is people, is man hours, is money. And so, so you want to shorten your lead time, because that's money. You do that by reducing your mean time to detection. You just mentioned that, right? So the sooner we want to fail fast, but early, right? And then what you start to realize, the other thing I learned, so I can actually say that I was able to justify a $6 million savings in year one, right? And it was partially because we realized 40% of everything we were doing was complete waste. And there was another good chunk of just waiting. I actually tracked our baseline process. Like an email goes out, and then it could take hours for the DBA to update the database. And once he was done, then my team could start to push out the code. And then we had to notify someone else to go validate. This was a 6 to 8 hour process. Now, someone might tell you the build only takes a half an hour, but the reality was it was a long process. And we got to the point where we could get that stuff out. If there was a failure, we knew it was a configuration item. It wasn't a database code mismatch. Those things went away because we were able to get our hands around those. So I would say it's time is money. Measure time. Measure how much time you're spending now and start spending less time on all of those things. Also, figure out how much time you're spending on rework, because that's all lost productivity. And when you start shrinking that time, that's time that you get to put back into productivity. There's a massive savings from you. And that's where the fallacy is. There's so much waste in most typical systems today that all you got to do is convert that waste into production, and you get a tremendous boost.
So going back a little bit, it's so the question is if I was able to convince or like to show the value to upper management, right? I started a new job recently because in my previous company it was very challenging, and I'm kind of I can be patient for whenever it's like if it's not working, I'm all good for and to keep moving forward, as long as you want to keep moving forward. And I'm based here in New York City, so there's like hundreds of different opportunities, and I'm being as transparent and honest as possible here. So it's been like quite a challenge. I tried for like close to 3 years, and I was doing like trying to find like people that would support or would understand what I was talking about. I was reporting to CTO, and wouldn't actually get the sense of the need for DevOps. It was more like in fact, it was like I truly believe in DevOps and like continuous integration, continuous delivery. I love Jess Hamben and Martin Fowler. Yeah, awesome. So let's do it. Well, we have something else. And that was quite challenging. And I'm going to turn 21 years old this year. So I kind of lost patience. Why you're laughing? This is true. So as you go and you get more experience and all, you just like either I even try to have like I was able to find really good people that really want to do that. But if you cannot show the value for the organization, you fail. And probably I failed of not be able to convince the upper management, or it was like a even bigger fight that above my pay grade, I guess.
So let me pivot for a second. So do you help your clients, your customer organizations that you work with, help them show management how to... Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you tell you one story. We started working with one of our first customers, and this is 10 years ago. So they used to do manual deployments, and when they are doing deployment to production, their production was down for 8 hours. They brought us in, and this is pre-Bamboo days, so we wrote custom software for them to do automated deployments. And the funny part was that 8 hours of manual deployment after automation went down to 3 minutes and some seconds. And the CTO comes to me, I don't know why they call him CTO. That how can software deploy software? And I was like, we are not having this conversation. So that's how we measure. What was it before? What was it after? And sometimes what was it before was time. But in many cases, it's also your error rate. And people lose more money because of error rate than the time. And being in New York, many people have heard about those stories where some of those hedge funds, they went bankrupt, not because of time, but because of error rate. So we bring all those metrics into picture when we are talking to a customer, and for some people, time rings bell, for some people, error rings bell, and for some other people, just dollar makes more sense. Oh, I can fire 500 people? Oh, let's do it.
Okay. Let's. Now, here's the question so the question is, do you consider it an honor and blessing to be working with me today? No, I'm just kidding. This is not,
Yes,
no, this is not a cabinet meeting. So, all right, but I have a funny feeling I know what some of the answers are going to be. What tools and technologies do you feel are key in your DevOps journey? Any in particular that you feel is often overlooked? And don't say Jenkins. Don't say Jenkins. No, you can if you want. You really can. Anyhow, so yeah, what tools and technologies do you feel, Stephen, have been key?
Yeah, I mean, we alluded to in our deck. I mean, the Atlassian tools, they've really changed our world. So there it is. It's a great suite. It covers a lot of bases for us. Both the collaboration is improved, the tracking is improved, the exposure to the outside the department. So the ability to expose these tools to our client services department, and our product owners use them. So it's not as much of a black box anymore. There's transparency to how the sausage is getting made. That kind of can spread throughout the organization, and that's really helped. It helps us make our case. When they can see, here's what's happening, here's how it's happening. So that's been kind of revolutionary for us.
One of the tools that I think it's critical for this to work, it's called like a human communication. Pen, paper, a whiteboard, and that's amazing. Starting there, it's certainly a great start. That's been very helpful. But I think it's I'm a huge fan of like pair programming. We are like in remote teams. We have people across the country and out and abroad as well. So. We use tools. We use like HipChat. We're certainly like an Atlassian shop, and HipChat is critical. The screen share that was released, I don't know, a year ago or so. It's been huge for us. We also use something called like Screen Hero, and that also works well for some teams. And I don't know, like all the integration that we have with Jenkins, Bamboo, Bitbucket, Git, of course, and with Bitbucket, but all that has been great. And we didn't explore yet much of the boats. That would be nice. I can see that playing as during the presentation. I was like, that would be cool. Like just start, have like a new friend, and like can do what I want. By the way, like Alexa, one of my best friends at home is the only one that actually responds to me when I ask. So I love that. So I'm a huge fan of Alexa, but we are not there yet. But thanks for that. And I think it depends. It's aligns what you said earlier. Is not trying to having a tool to find the problem. It's like having like a problem, and then you try to find the right tool for that. So just don't try to actually keep adding tools and tools and tools, and that's becomes worse than no tools at all. So start with the pen, pencil, and then you, and paper, and then you kind of keep upgrading there.
That and Post-it notes are really underrated.
Post-it notes are underrated.
They are underrated.
So for me, I mean, to me, it's disingenuous to talk about any specific tool because there's literally so many. And if we think about what it takes just to achieve self-service environment provisioning, there's a lot of tools in there, right? So it's this capability, right? So,
Yep.
But what I will say is this, like, so if we break it into two big classes, you get CI and CD. CI and CD themselves are really just orchestration, and they rely on testing. Testing is what makes that work, and that's going to be highly dependent upon your app. So it's to your point, there's not a hammer that solves all your testing problems. There's very specific tools that will test your particular sort of implementation, and so it's about it's about finding your way through that. And then what I'll tell you is what some people that are further down this journey than others have learned is, let's say you've tackled those things, then you're going to run up against security, compliance, and governance, right? And then that's going to be your last sort of problem domain that you're going to get out there. And without naming our tool, I'll tell you that we have a small play within that space. But what I will say is, even testing is going to challenge you to rethink your architecture. Testing is going to, you have to you don't try to automate the way you test today. Rethink how to actually test and implement that, right? It is not take your existing processes and automate them. That's why that's why I think the huge challenge for many is you got to let go of what you do, and you got to figure out what works in today's context with today's tools, and then go find them, right? And there's just so many.
Go ahead, plug your product. I think you should.
I'm from Sonatype. Reach out to, afterwards out there. We sell a security and compliance that helps apply supply chain management principles to your open source consumption. A very sort of narrow niche in all of this, but one that's, we saw a gap and we tried to fill it because not a lot of folks are doing anything in that space. And we do it in a way that really empowers the developers. It's not the typical way you would solve this problem. Right? It's a very fresh way of thinking about how to solve that problem, and that's why we're here with Addteq, because they saw what we do and they liked it, and we want to do more of that together.
Yep, it's a soapbox. GRC is a soapbox issue for me. I honestly think we are all going to be talking about GRC in the coming years. It's governance, risk, and compliance.
And you make a good point,
boom,
because
boom.
we'll get a lot of the basics that we've struggled with in the past will start to come off the table. We can solve most of those problems, and then you're going to have to start dealing with those macro problems, right? So I agree with you. I think as we get more and more of that stuff sort of becomes ho-hum to us, then we're going to start dealing with a lot more of this. But especially, we live in the breach a week club, right?
Yep.
It's just a matter of time till our personal data has been lost by one of the many people we do business with. Yep. And so it's something that should be near and dear to all of us, and then certainly our own company and our own product, because that's the kind of branding that puts you out of business, no matter how good your DevOps is.
Yep. I'm not even going to ask you what tool and technologies you feel are important, because we know.
Code Factory.
Code Factory.
That was really,
It's such a good
by
tool,
the
they made a
way,
drink of
that
it.
was really impressive. I hadn't seen the demo before. That sort of blew me away. That was really impressive. Gosh, I think we've covered just about everything. Is that it?
Yeah, we should open it up.
Oh, hell yes.
This has been one way. It needs to be more two-way.
Yeah.
And just repeat the questions whenever you do.
I'll run around.
Any questions?
Come on, it's got to be a question.
Okay, I'll ask one. It's one that's been involved in DevOps for a while with a larger organization. I have struggled while building an organizational trust with the right way to reinvest in the people, because in the information age, it's all about investing in people, not in tooling. What would you recommend?
All right, so let me see if I can paraphrase that real quick, make sure everyone heard. So a large organization, building trust, and how do we actually invest in people? And I'm actually really glad you said that, because I had notes to talk about culture just a little bit more. And this is something I have some firsthand experience with, and I can provide even some anecdotal stories. But the new State of the DevOps report, first off, I mean, you need to be reading that. And it talks about change leadership and how important this is in creating that generative culture. So I've described the climate, which is, we have a lot of self-service. I can go do my experiment. It's safe to fail because I can fail early in a test environment, right? And we can learn. And I say that's a lot of it. And you'll also be surprised how much better. So I had a guy that he would spend 6 hours updating all of our ETL on production night. And he did it by hand, right? So he was doing everything, like he was clicking in the GUI, right? And so we approached him to automate that. And at first he was like, this is great, Kurt, but I'm a little concerned because I don't really have time to support this. I was like, don't worry about it. Let us just help you out. You can just use it, get comfortable with it. And the thing, to sort of fast forward is, once we got to where he was spending less than 2 hours on that same production deploy, mostly because he just had to kind of go through and look at everything and see that it worked, right? So he went from like an 8-hour night to like less than a 2-hour night. He's going to bed at 2 in the morning instead of 6 in the morning or later. Then he came back to me. He was a new person, right? He came, and now he's like, wow, now I actually think I can support what you're doing because I have all this extra time, right? And someone talked about that in their talk today. You'll be surprised when you take these things off your plate how much you can do. And now you're starting to be like you're at Atlassian, where now you can do the things you want to do. You can start to improve the things you want to improve. So I will say it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling, but it does take, if you read the culture part of State of the DevOps, it has to be generative. It has to be an environment where it's safe for people to have ideas, to do their experiments, to bring their information. It's going to be heard. And when there's a mistake, you don't shoot the messenger, right? And I think what you'll find is there's a big turnaround. Another good book on this is Lean Enterprise. So the real short story there is there was a really poor performing GM plant out in California. They shut it down. And when Toyota came in to redo it, they made them bring all the same people back, right? They did new processes, but they made them bring all the same people back because they wanted to prove to GM that it wasn't the people. They blamed the people. They fired the people. But it wasn't the people. And those people wrote testimonies how it made them better fathers, better community, like it changed their life. So I don't want to get too carried away with that, but it kind of plays on itself, because if I can take all that really crappy repetitive work off your plate and you can now start to do something that you feel like you're adding value, some of that's going to just start to happen, right? And the leadership has to just be supportive and not be dicks about it, right?
Well, totally agreeing with your cultural commentary. Any particular recommendations for encouraging or doing reinvestment in the people?
Yeah, I mean, because that's, if you haven't seen the Andrew Clay Schaefer talk on There Is No DevOps Talent Shortage. So in the old world, we talk people, process, and tools. But when we meant people, what we meant was skills. Now we talk culture, kind of process and tools. And culture is a learning environment. And we expect everyone to come and learn in our learning environment. So I will say what I like about when, like, instead of thinking you've got to hire the talent, that sends the wrong message to the people that are there. But if you bring in someone like Addteq and they take your talent and raise their game, that's a very different message, right? That's a very different message. And even if it's unspoken, that's, that message is going around. They recognize, like, wow, they don't believe any of us can do this, so they're hiring outside people. That's a message that people are going to hear loud and clear. So I agree with you. I've taken fresh out of college kids who didn't know what they couldn't do and created a high-performing team in no time, but they had none of the baggage of, this is how we've always done things, and you can't do that because X, Y, Z, and I'm like, no, I can absolutely do that. So I don't know if it answers your question, but I think we're kind of dancing around it. But I definitely, you can take the people you have today and do it. You don't have to go hire those skills. Because if it's a learning thing, you just create that climate and let the people you have learn.
Stephen, I think you're chomping at the bit to answer this one.
Yeah, go.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to, there's that command and control mode you can get into where the people at the top have the most information, so they know not just what should happen, but they kind of think they know how it should happen. So you're just told what to do. And it's kind of amazing how you would think that implementation is spared from that, because how could these people know how to implement, a database model or something like that? They kind of think they do sometimes. So to avoid that, and that's a lot of what Agile talks about, right, is avoid that square in the quadrant. That's the bad square. The good square is innovation. So to invest in the people, you want to give them acceptance criteria. You want to say, this is where we want to end up. How are we going to get there? And everybody's idea should be valid. There should be an environment where anybody, I don't care how junior you are, if you have a good idea, there's a process by which you can spit that idea out, and it has a way to gain traction. It has a way to make it through the pipeline. And if you accomplish that, your people are going to feel invested in the project.
And if we go back to that whole cultural thing, people want to know that somebody gives a rat's ass about what they think, right? And it's just so easy to create an environment where you listen to them and you care about what they have to say. It's just simple. It doesn't cost you anything. And it's transformative for people.
And earlier, I forgot to, you talked about, you guys do that annual survey. And I'm assuming a lot of companies do that. That's another metric on ROI. I posited with my own company that engagement metrics would go up because of what I described, because I saw it anecdotally. I knew that people were starting to want to come to work, whereas before they sort of dreaded coming to work, or they certainly dreaded production deploy night. But that started changing. Production deploy night wasn't a dreadful event anymore, and coming to work meant, hey, I'm actually going to get to do some things that are kind of cool, or learn, or advance my skills. So it's a totally different dynamic, and it'll come out in those kinds of reports. And I meant to mention that in terms of measurement, because those kinds of surveys are, employee climate surveys are very, very important. Yep. And you'll see the needle move. It'll be obvious.
We do an annual, and we also do them quarterly. We run them quarterly across the whole company and then share the results with everyone. Yeah.
Any other questions? No, come on. All right, one over here. Let me bring you the mic too, so we don't have to try to even repeat it.
Thank you. So you mentioned there's a square, there's a quadrant that you want to be stuck in. If you're stuck in that square, do you have any advice to get out of it? If you want to be let's say you're at a place and you want to be the change agent. Any recommendations on that?
All right, I'll let you answer. That's pretty much right for you.
Well,
I have 2 cents to add.
it goes back to what Anthony said. It
What a
definitely needs
surprise.
buy-in from the top, because usually that's coming from the top. If the higher echelons really only feel secure if they have that much command and control, it's going to be tough to budge them. So convincing them that you've got the talent to actually innovate and bring new solutions to light,
Sorry, that was me.
that's what's going to work. How to get there, it really depends on who you're dealing with, I think. But there's plenty of success stories you can try and point to say, hey, look, they did this and it worked. We should try it too.
I actually think that you've got a really interesting idea because you just tried to get out of that box and couldn't, so you had to move on. And I think that's valid also.
That's I guess my background is engineering, computer science, and end up actually leading teams, and that's what I do nowadays. But my thought process is a little bit more logical, so which aligns with what you were saying. And you try to find people that believe in what you believe, and you try to make that bigger and show with metrics, with the culture, bring external help, and you see if there's some heartbeat from the upper management. Sometimes there's a heartbeat. Yeah, wow, that team is actually really showing results. Oh, yeah, let's. What you did there? That can you do that in another team? So that's actually a good example. The upper management is actually looking, and there's a heartbeat. If you try that and you try different approaches, and things are not actually, giving the expected results, My recommendation, based on my experience, is like any other relationship. Move on.
Yeah, I was gonna leave you with the Martin Fowler quote. If you can't change your company, change your company. Right? And it's true. Go find the right environment for you. And part of it's just finding the right mix, right? You know, maybe maybe the place you're at is just not the right place. It's not their fault either.
So again, I come from a healthcare environment. I know
Fair enough.
you were in there. So I support 18 different hospitals, 50,000 different medical groups, 60,000 employees.
Yep.
Wow. So we have one team that's really into agile, okay? And my support team across all verticals, okay, use Kanban. Okay, that's kind of what we leverage for that. But the challenge is here is that even our agile team, they're very innovative. They kind of take a look at new ideas. But think from an integration perspective that if I change something on one integration engine, it'll impact everything downstream.
Understood.
So the challenge here is there are multiple groups and disciplines across all that. So we have one development team, which again, they do very innovative work, okay? It's to get the buy-in from everyone else that they really should be part of this. So again, I have domestic and international teams that report to me. So the challenges with that is if I take that one agile team and I look at its DevOps area, is that something that's restricted to that DevOps group where they now should be reporting to development? Or should that be part of my internal group that handles everything else?
The upside opportunities to make it interdisciplinary, to eliminate the silos, is spread out.
Yeah, I mean, because you lost me. I mean, at first you were talking about, like, you got teams moving at different speeds, and that kind of creates some friction. I get that, and especially it comes to integration. But, so now let's challenge some things that you hold dear. Let's challenge your architecture. That's where microservices comes in. What if I can make a change, and I can do it in such a small way to the service, and I know that it's not going to affect anyone? And now integrating an update to a microservice doesn't have the same impact. So you come up with architectural techniques to remove some of that
Wait a
friction.
minute, we've got to follow on.
We're from the same company.
Yeah.
So I hear what he's saying, and I think that's a definition issue within our company, that DevOps is a people, it's a team. And when-
No, right, and that's what threw me at the end, is you ended with a DevOps team. Right, and you know, that's why that team needs to be a team of enablement. They need to be a team that's going out and working with teams and bringing them up, not a team that people come to buy fish, right? They got to go out and teach fishing,
Yeah, so
right, to use that metaphor again.
I think we use our DevOps term as a sustained engineering team. That's all it is.
Right.
But it's really the culture. I lead the agile team.
Yeah.
As mentioning, I'm the agile coach.
Oh, it's your fault.
I'll show you. See me.
I didn't want to say that. Talking about DevOps in an agile term.
Yeah.
I would discuss agile and now look at DevOps because we need to speed up our teams.
Back out here. See me. There's this DevOps patterns, and you're sort of in a first phase anti-pattern, but it's also the stepping stone to get to where you need to be, because you do have a team that can start to bridge and pull folks together. That's not how you want to run the railroad ultimately, but it's not a horrible place to start, right? Because you at least have someone that's trying to bridge that gap. So when I started in my insurance company, the biggest thing I did, I had a little drawing that had source code control, it had a block that said build, it had a block that said repository manager, it had a block that said deployment, and then I had a list of environments. And I did something that was unheard of. I walked around and I started knocking on doors like security. And I knocked on the door and said, security, this is how we build stuff. Where can I put you in here? How and where do you fit into this? I went to my auditors and said, let's talk about our risk management. How can I make this so that it's very audit friendly? And I went to my legal team and said, how can I protect us from, unwanted licenses? And I started just asking people based on this drawing, how do I get you in this? And so that was a role of, I wasn't handing out fish, but I was trying to recruit people to come fishing with me, right? And I was getting them to understand, like, this is what the factory line looks like. How do I build a robot arm that makes sure that you can sleep at night? Because that's what I want to do. I'm going to build one robotic arm that makes sure that what you need to happen happens every time, right? And that was sort of my approach. Now, don't get me wrong, you got a long road to hoe, but you're in a good starting place, because even though you have that anti-pattern now, there's another pattern that takes that exact same thing and says, if you use that to pull these disparate teams together, that can start to work for you. So that's my advice.
Well, what part of that is my discipline is if I do it for one, I do it across the board. I've already put that in place.
Right.
But now we're starting to move to that next level where, okay, in this particular, again, I look at this agile team as, okay, how can we do it that we use this as a showcase to guys, this is what you
Right.
can do if you get this done.
Right.
Okay, and I think that's what you're also looking from our end,
Right.
so we can get on board the multiple teams from the other disciplines that say, yeah, this will work for us. So across my whole enterprise, I have standards that match all my different engines and everything else, and that's what I put in place. Again, security, every other group, I've reached out to them and said, look, this is the process. If you need to do it, you do it for one, you do it for all. Right? This is my standard. But now we want to get to that next stage, and I totally agree with DevOps. And that's kind of what I need to understand, that we use this agile group that you're currently managing to use that as a presentation to all other teams and say, look, this is what it entails.
So we did that with trust. Yeah, I agree. You did that with trust.
Because if it's functional with them and we're looking at other teams like the high, heavy, critical applications, you get another one on board, everyone else will follow.
Let me ask that differently. If you say to Bob, right, look at Mike, he's doing great, why can't you be like Mike? You don't want to have that conversation. You want to say, Bob, I trust you, I believe in you, I'm going to empower you to own this.
So the way I was planning to do that from a support perspective is once we get what's being done with the agile team with DevOps, when they have issues with other environments, say, look, we're currently doing this for this team, and it's working very well, you may want to get engaged. 'Cause you're not going to tell anybody what to do, you're just going to recommend.
So let me ask one question to wrap up this one. Is have you tried to bring external help, from with like the mindset, the culture that's going to take you to the next step, to the next level?
When you say,
Yeah, like consulting company.
this is the initial part.
Addteq's a good one. I know people here, so you know I don't work for Addteq, just to make that very clear. But I know good people that can help you
I
there.
have all the cards. So,
Okay.
but that's kind of where we're at. As you're saying,
Yeah.
it's an infancy stage. Like, okay, we start DevOps. Okay, I kind of want to put myself in the right position, okay, to get that buy-in. Okay, so
Yeah.
as you're saying, I totally believe you don't get leadership buy-in, nothing's going to get done.
That's right.
They're just going to tell you, I don't have the time, I don't have the effort, we'll look at this next time. Right. And that's kind of what I'm looking
That's
for.
right.
Again, I leverage Ricardo a lot, 'cause he's very good with that, but that's kind of why I'm here today, to find out, okay, guys.
Let's continue this out there.
Not only that, Ricardo looks a lot like Stanley Tucci, who's a terrific actor. He is a terrific actor. Fabulous. You look a bit like him.
Now, the answer to that is automation. I would say you need to automate everything. And I'll end that with a joke. My wife one
It
one
better
day.
be funny.
It is. I
Okay,
think.
good. Okay, good.
So,
Can we have books to have like Alexa fix all the issues?
oh, why not? So my wife once told me is, get milk from the grocery store, and if they have eggs, bring 6. So I brought 6 gallons of milk. So people make mistakes. But once you automate things, people didn't recover
That's
from
very
it.
good. That was very good. I think on that note, we probably ought to end this.
Yes, thank you so much for the panelists. Please. I definitely love the fireside chat and everyone being real intimate about this. Please continue this conversation outside over food. There's real food this time, guys. It's not just bar snacks. So make sure you stay a little bit and have some food. The raffle, which everyone's, I'm pretty sure, is sitting around waiting for, is going to be at 8:30. Keep in mind, you have to be present to win. So, if you're not here, we call your name.
What's the price?
The prize is, oh, I thought I said it, is the DJI Spark drone. It's that, yeah, I know. If you guys don't want it, I'll take it. Just saying. The drinks are outside, food's outside. Raffle's going to be at 8:30. Questions, please stop these guys, and that's what they're here for, right? Oh, there's a survey. That's right, there's a survey. I already told you guys about the survey. So you get extra raffle tickets when you complete the survey. FYI. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.